Correct. Absolutely. Correct. Absolutely. Okay, go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? My name is Brandon Chung, and I work on the government relations team here at Razor, the global micromobility company based in Los Angeles. I apologize that I'm not able to participate with you over Zoom or video this afternoon, as we're based in Los Angeles, and we're having a power outage right now, so I do apologize. Thank you all for joining us today for session 2 of today's conference. Razor is proud to sponsor today's panel on Safe Streets for All, which represents part of our company's broader and ongoing efforts to support the communities in which we operate in meaningful and substantive ways. Since launching our dockless shared scooter service in Tucson over a year and a half ago, Razor has proudly served nearly 30,000 unique riders with nearly 160,000 rides in Tucson. This amounts to tens of thousands of miles of travel within the city of Tucson through an affordable, sustainable, non-emitting means of transportation. Razor has committed and remain committed to ensuring that our devices are used safely and responsibly. And to that end, Razor has and will continue to double down on our rider education efforts in our platform through our social media and our customer contact channels, and through our many virtual and in-person community engagement events. Our team has also worked with the City of Tucson staff over the past month to modify our operations, including the addition or revision of geofenced zones in response to feedback that we received from the Tucson's Department of Transportation and various other community stakeholders. In March of 2020, Razor introduced a set of industry-leading sanitation protocols in response to the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that we continue to serve our employees and our customers safely and responsibly. In practice, this means that almost all of our scooters are sanitized daily. These protocols were implemented across all of our shared scooter markets, including Tucson, and will remain in place for the foreseeable future. Now more than ever, Tucson residents and visitors need a safe and affordable means of getting around. Razor is proud to have maintained its dockless shared scooter service, which we believe has become a safe and integral part of Tucson's public transportation infrastructure throughout the COVID-19 crisis. We look forward to continuing to serve the Tucson community. And with that, I'll turn it over to our panel's moderator, Professor Nicole Eros-Alardo.
Thank you, Brandon. And thanks for making that work over phone and in power outages. We have to be very flexible these days. I am Nicole Eros-Alardo. I'm an assistant research professor of urban planning at the University of Arizona, and I'm delighted to see the city start this tradition of a transportation summit every year. I will be your moderator today. My own research interests include all things active transportation and all things built environment as they relate to increasing social justice as measured by health equity. So this means I'm typically examining how our investments and our programs can reorient towards those who need it most and those we often overlook. I'm so excited with this lineup today because we have amazing professionals who work on this every day, ready to share their wisdom with you. So this session is all about making safe streets for all. We know that traffic safety initiatives like Vision Zero are not new, but the approaches to building safer streets are changing. Part of this is that we are learning new things, but we're also asking ourselves really hard and important questions like how can we safely get everyone to be able to navigate and comfortably go on all of our streets, including women and people of color. So today we're going to hear how cities are re-examining the role of enforcement, incorporating new policies, designing streets to account for human error, and coupling those efforts with data and education. We will explore the challenges and opportunities on our streets as we work in pursuit of zero traffic deaths. So the first person that we will have speaking to us is Marianne Aguirre, who is a project director at People for Mobility Justice. Marianne was born and raised in Los Angeles as the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She's lived the reality of transportation equity as a young mother at age 17 with little or no access to a vehicle. Marianne has joined All Women of Color Bicycle Collective Ovarian Psychos in 2011, and during her 5 years as an active core member, she centered much of her work and passion around women of color on bicycles as an alternative method of transportation and as a tool for social change. So People of Mobility Justice scooped her up, and she's been with them since 2014, where she's been developing and led innovative community-based campaigns such as bike rides and programs that center women, people of color, and low-income communities in public planning processes. She looks at bicycle education, street safety, land use, and affordable housing. I really love that affordable housing is in there. And she has served as a mayoral appointee for the Bicycle Advisory Committee for the City of Los Angeles. So I'm going to move over to getting your slides up, Marianne, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. Good to virtually be here with you all. I'll wait for the slides to appear. I think there's a couple more on top. Great. So thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Marianne Aguirre. Pronouns are she, her, hers. And yeah, great to be here. It is surprisingly raining in Los Angeles, and it is about 60 degrees and I am freezing. So yeah, this very rare day in LA. So next slide, please. So before we begin, I would really like to do a land acknowledgement. And then to acknowledge the Native people of this place. So I am born and raised in Los Angeles, which is occupied Tongva land. And so much of People for Mobility Justice's work takes place in Los Angeles, but the ancestral territories of the Tongva, Tsasaviam, and Chumash indigenous communities. So if you are in California, I encourage you to take a look at this map, but if you are not, as most of you all, I'm assuming, are in Tucson, I encourage you to please acknowledge the Native people of the place where you may be working in. So next slide, please. So again, a little bit about myself. I don't want to reiterate what Nicole already mentioned, but my name is Marianne Aguirre. I'm the project director at People for Mobility Justice. I like to refer myself sometimes as like this accidental advocate. I came into this work, as mentioned, as being a young mother at the age of 17. Had no access to a car. So I basically rode my bike with my daughter, took the bus, took the train everywhere with her. Slowly started getting more into the work of transportation by working with an all women of color bicycle collective, then working with People for Mobility Justice as a project specialist in a project that they're working in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles. And from there, just continue to work with them. So yeah, next slide, please. So People for Mobility Justice, we operate with loving accountability, joy, and solidarity, centered on Black and Brown communities in order to transcend systems of oppression and violence. As a Black and Indigenous people of color organization, we seed critical consciousness about mobility justice across all communities. We envision a world where people have the freedom and resources to move in public space with love and dignity. And throughout the years, PMJ has focused on documenting and addressing the transportation needs voiced by LA's communities of color who have been disproportionately impacted by deaths and injuries caused by traffic violence and the lack of proper infrastructure. However, the majority of the time, these individuals are also at risk for law enforcement, harassment, racism, sexism, xenophobia, anti-Blackness while walking and biking in our neighborhoods. So next slide, please. So before we begin, and given the theme of today's panel discussion, I really wanted to propose a question to everybody, everybody who's in attendance right now. And I just want to start off and just ask folks, what do safe streets look like to you? What do they feel like to you? What do they smell like to you? So if you can please put it in the chat box, and maybe I can have the assistance of Gabriella or Nicole helping me read them out. Really quick, we'll take about 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So I can't see the chat box. I would really love to. So yeah. Folks can. And to me, to let you all know what safe streets look like to me, safe streets look like street vendors. It smells like food. Safe streets also look like no police for me. Maybe other transit ambassadors on trains. So, Nicole?
Families in the street, I'm hearing. Familias in the street, so probably our Latinas. Sidewalk buffers, slower speed limits. No danger from others or from vehicles, especially walking. Cars in appropriate places.
Okay.
So these are all great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Feel free to continue to put what safe streets look like to you. So yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So I think there's a slide right before that. Thank you. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about, obviously, given that the day's theme with Vision Zero and about safe streets, I wanted to discuss, obviously, in 2015, LA Mayor Garcetti launched the citywide Vision Zero initiative in Los Angeles to reduce traffic fatalities citywide by 20%. In 2017 and reduce pedestrian and traffic fatalities citywide to 0 by 2025. However, the lack of implementation by Mayor Eric Garcetti and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation has led to actually a stronger increase in traffic fatalities. And LA now sees about 30% more annual traffic fatalities than New York City, despite being only half the population. And according to the US Department of Transportation, LA sees about 5 traffic fatalities per week, and that's 8 fatalities per 100,000 residents per year. So as most folks are familiar, Vision Zero first implemented their 3 E's: education, evaluation, engineering, and enforcement, or their 4 E's. I know since then they have changed it and also implemented equity with that. But if we could go to the next slide, please. I wanted to discuss an alternative to street safety that PMJ has been wanting to, or has been implementing in our work, and kind of a different framework of how we want to look at street safety and how we think streets should be designed. So as a response to the shortcomings of Vision Zero, PMJ created our 5 Ds as an initiative to collectively define street safety and secure streets in low-income communities of color. PMJ began with publishing a blog post titled Vision Incomplete in 2018, where we discuss how Vision Zero is being implemented while Black, Indigenous people of color are simultaneously being heavily policed and displaced physically, culturally, and psychologically. It is in that context that we introduced our 5 Ds to inspire critical dialogue and how this relates to mobility justice. So what is mobility justice? It calls to the attention to the fact that individuals face different challenges in transportation because the way we are socially controlled in public space, and that manifests itself differently. We acknowledge the intersections between transportation and the other parts of people's lives, such as race, gender, class, and we organize toward radical safety for all through multiracial organizing, self-determination, and economic empowerment. And so when we began this think tank and this framework, we created a think tank in Leimert Park geared towards community-based activists, youth, and elders to really discuss and dissect our 5Ds and what mobility justice means to them. So I'm going to be really quick discussing what our 5Ds are and some of the outcomes that came from those conversations. And hopefully with, given today's topic, hopefully provide just a new framework for everybody who's on this panel or everybody who's in attendance, just so we can begin to maybe think about street safety in other ways as well. So next slide, please. So our first D is decolonize. So may our approach in urban planning, design, and decision-making be rooted in the ancestral land in which we work, live, play, to honor the indigenous people and the native flora and fauna. Additionally, we are committed to halting the colonial practices that displace our people to ensure that long-term residents will be protected and have full rights to stay in their communities, be it as tenants, homeowners, or business owners. Decolonize is often an interesting concept to understand and how to implement decolonized methodologies into our work. In the article by Tuck and Yang called Decolonization is Not a Metaphor, they discuss how decolonization brings about the respiration of indigenous life and is not a metaphor for other things we want to improve in our societies. PMJ uses decolonize, PMJ's use of decolonize makes a connection to mobility justice in our work. When speaking about decolonization, this is used specifically to name partnerships with local Native tribes. And we believe it is imperative to connect and uplift local indigenous leadership and mobility justice and mobility planning. So next slide, please. Thank you, Vanessa. Decongest. So may everyone have access to transportation and streets that support our full well-being and keep us alive. Decongest is meant to connect transportation planning language around concepts like highway congestion, pricing, and environmental justice language around air pollution as a burden on communities of color. In discussing decongest with the Leimert Park think tank that I was mentioning earlier, many participants talk about climate change and environmental racism. We think sustainable infrastructure cannot be built without paying attention to the ways in which transportation infrastructure share space and reproduce intersectional inequalities of social class, race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, nationality, citizenship. And we need to acknowledge the relationship between infrastructure and deeply entrenched histories of mobility injustices, such as redlining. So next slide, please. Decriminalize. May Black, Brown, and undocumented people have the freedom to move in public space without the fear of harassment, deportation, or death. As prison abolitionist Ruth Wilson Gilmore once said, you don't solve a problem with state violence or personal violence. Instead, you change the conditions under which violence prevailed. Many advocates and scholars were concerned with the specific pillar of Vision Zero's enforcement, which led to increased police harassment, traffic violations in a time where residents, specifically Black and Brown communities, were protesting to call attention to deadly effects of racial profiling. Our PMJ co-founder, Dr. Donia Lugo, discusses in a blog post titled Unsolicited Advice for Vision Zero. Her biggest concern with Vision Zero stems from its overlap with, but its disconnect from Black Lives Matter. From the overwhelming concerns about the enforcement, Vision Zero should implement the support for police. Vision Zero should not support the presence of police violence and should support reform because traffic violence is often a problem, but policing is not always a solution. An example of rethinking enforcement is in 2017, Chicago released their Vision Zero action plan, and then in their executive summary referenced enforcement through the establishment of a citywide police policy to police traffic fairly, quote unquote, focusing on education and the dangerous driving behaviors that cause most severe crashes. In the plan, they specify that increased citations are not an indicator of success, but identified speed as a major factor in fatal crashes. Therefore, they propose working with communities to determine ways to prevent speeding. Next slide, please. Dignify. May the people who are houseless, have other abilities, are LGBTQIA, work in the streets, be it be as sex workers, street vendors, etc., have immense protection for their lives and the resources they need to support their well-being. Popular education plays a role in this approach to dignify individuals, and it's rooted in the knowledge and experiences of people. We believe it is imperative to value and include community members in all aspects of the planning processes. It is important to bring dignity to different people and their lived experiences, and bring dignity to those who utilize public space and space in different ways as a form of income, again, such as street vendors or musicians. Next slide, please. So determination or dream, may Black, Indigenous, people of color have the right to self-determination, which we defined as ensuring that our voice and leadership are valued monetarily, from the expert advice to implement the realities of our streets. PMJ approaches this as a way to center how people are building a new future. And this is examined through ways that we organize with different groups that are dreaming about the ways that we want to create our communities. So next slide, please. So I know I rushed through those a little bit quickly, but I did want to kind of touch on a little bit of the fact of how PMJ has been also, have we been implementing these 5Ds and this framework into our work. Currently, PMJ is working on a campaign with a transit coalition that we're a part of, ACT LA in Los Angeles. We are currently working on envisioning Metro as a sanctuary. And so with this campaign of envisioning Metro as a sanctuary, we're working, we have worked with the Metro Board of Directors to currently replace police officers on Metro Transit with unsworn, unarmed public safety personnel to keep riders safe. I know it's a far stretch sometimes for individuals to kind of think about and think that that's a possibility, but this is something that we feel is important to continue to push towards. Another campaign that we are working on too is, I think this falls into the concept of dignifying, and it's to advocate, to continue to advocate for fare free transit in Los Angeles. This is something that Mayor, or the CEO of Metro has also been trying to implement, but we have had several meetings with them to kind of find a way to have full fare free transit in Los Angeles. I know I was speaking to someone from Tucson that was mentioning how currently Tucson is also on fare free transit right now, but I believe that's going to end in June. So I think this may be a good time to, you know, to really think about how we can implement and dignify people's lives and understand that, you know, how can we get to fare free transit, especially in a time right now when, you know, our communities are dealing with so much given COVID, given given everything that's going on. So yeah, like I said, I'm rushed through it a little bit, but I really wanted to lay this foundation of just like a different concept of how we can really envision street safety and think about other things that are important in advocating for safe streets for all. So if folks are interested too, I can share some of the stuff that I was referring to with the different blog posts and the different stuff that I was referring to. So I can share that with folks too. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Let's see, let me start my videos by stopping my share and doing a little bit of the tech side on here. Our next, so we're gonna hold questions to the very end as a general rule here. And my next speaker should be Vanessa. And Vanessa Gallego is a co-founder of Fuga here in Tucson. So a lot of you probably know her. She's a native Tucsonese. Is that how we say that here? I need to get up to speed. I'm not a native here. And is the Chief Operating Officer for Recyco, Tucson's industry-leading scrap metal recycling center. She's an alum of UA and remains involved in various community organizing efforts around sustainability and mobility advocacy, including as the chair of the Tucson Commission on Climate, Energy, and Sustainability. She's also a board member for Tucson's BICUS, the Bicycle Inner Community Art and Salvage organization, which is the longest continuous bike run collective nonprofit in the US. Ooh, I didn't know that. That's awesome. That promotes affordable bicycle transportation through education, access to bicycle salvage, and bike art. She's a founding member and ride leader of FUGA. So that's Familias Unidas Ganado Accesibilidad. And so it's Our Families United Gaining Accessibility. It works in both languages, which is awesome. And this organization in our south side of Tucson, which is our historic Hispanic or Latinx neighborhood, is made up of stakeholders and residents highlighting mobility through bicycling on the streets and advocacy. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to her.
Thank you. Gracias. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Wonderful. Okay. No?
You're good.
Can you hear me now? Everything okay? Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I'm with Families United Gaining Accessibility, Familias Unidas Ganando Accesibilidad. And that's a picture of our crew from 2019. So next slide, please. So yes, my name is Vanessa Gallego. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I am a ride leader for FUGA, and I got involved with mobility in 2017 when a project was centered in a project area of South Tucson, in which we incorporated stakeholders, both businesses and residents, to be at the table and talk about mobility. So that's how I got involved, was being a business owner in the project area. And little by little, I got introduced into bicycling. Next slide, please. So Families United Gaining Accessibility really came out in 2018 when we decided as the stakeholders, residents, and business owners to really do a collective, a coalition of partners, as well as small businesses, organizations, nonprofits in the project area who intersected with mobility. And one of the things that kind of motivated us is that we were thinking, you know, let's use bicycle as to center, you know, bicycling with transportation. And one of the first things we heard out of the South Side was the South Side doesn't ride bicycles. And I quoted un fulanex, and that means a John Doe in Spanish, but it has an X, so it's non-gendered. But that's what we were hearing. So that's a photo from our 2019 ride, in which we're clearly trying to change perception. Next slide, please. So who is FUGA? FUGA is made up, like I said, of stakeholders from both residents and businesses to organizations such as BICUS. We have representation of folks in our collective, as well as the Primavera Foundation. Just want to highlight those partnerships. We have members who are also current employees of the city of Tucson, and also some from transportation that attend regularly our events as well as meetings. And FUGA is 100% run by volunteers. Next slide, please. Awesome. So we're here to talk about safe streets, and I wanted to post this picture because when we're talking about safe streets, right? We have a we're burning some sage, and this was for a ride that we had in collaboration with the Cesar Chavez Holiday Coalition, in which a march is always done, and we decided as FUGA to lead a rally on bici through the streets of South Tucson on South 6th where we took up a lane, and we had over 40 riders partake that day and that morning. So just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. So similarly to our friends out in LA, P and M and J, we acknowledge the land that we are on. These are the lands of the Tohono O'odham and Paspayaki peoples. And Fuga will always acknowledge that when we talk about mobility and land, we're going to acknowledge these spaces, because when we're talking about changing perceptions, we're not just talking about the perceptions of us, we're talking about perceptions in general, especially in these spaces. So next slide, please. Okay, so Fuga, like I said, started with the primary focus of the south side of Tucson in a project area that we deemed the south side. And we started with using bicycle as a tool. So we started 2 rides. One ride in particular was the Bicicleteada del Sur ride, which is every last Friday of the month at a area that we knew was central to folks, which is the Pueblo Center. The Pueblo Center has an activity center, has a center, the medical center, and those areas get used a lot by folks in our community, as well as right next to the Suntran station, the Lao Center. So picking that area was a nice hub for folks to not only meet and mingle, but it was an area that was central to many folks to use. In 2020, we expanded to the west side of Tucson. You'll see that little orange bubble to the left, or the west side of town, in which we introduced the Sunday brunch ride. And that is at 10 a.m., the second Sunday of the month. And luckily we're back. So our next ride will be March 14th. So other projects that we're thinking about 2021 are expanding to other barrios and as well as spaces. So to the east of these bubbles, you'll see that there's some areas that, can definitely use some Fuga help. And one of the project areas that we've been asked to maybe partake in would be in Barrio Centro, which is an area that's already very active with folks, and to collaborate with some of the organizations there and probably bring some mobility to that area and some pride in the barrio rides. Next slide, please. So you probably heard me say that we use bicycle as a tool. Bicycle was the easiest way to really get people engaged. So it was a no-brainer, especially around the fact that we were starting off with this from the very beginning with our collaborations early on through some engagement with People for Bikes and some grant money that we were able to get early on in 2017. We have used the rides as a way to engage and educate in mobility. A lot of times when you're trying to get folks involved, the lens that they see, is either from a car, from a bus, or for walking. So we decided to use the bicycle as a lens that we can not only get people engaged, but also center safety around. Networking and collaborations. We've worked with numerous partners over the years in making these rides, making things accessible, but also highlighting things, because we understand the intersectionality of transportation intersects both health, both access to work, and a lot of things that People for Mobility Justice really advocates. And I just want to tip my hats off to y'all, because y'all are an organization that we really look up to and follow. So thank you for being here. So we built a lot of collaborations and networks, because it's crucial for us to be able to spread not only what we're trying to do, but also get that support. And that includes working with community leadership already, either in the barrios and the neighborhood associations, but also folks that we know have potential. So we are actively looking for folks who are engaged, who are looking to be part of something. And we quickly pick those people up so they can help with this vision. And one of the most important things that the bicycle does is visibility and representation. Like I said, folks used to say, there's no bicycle riding on the south side. Well, we wanted to prove that wrong. So one of the things we wanted to do was not only represent, people of color on bikes, but also try to make some visibility. So these bicycle rides are actually modeled after critical mass rides that are done in many cities throughout the world to increase visibility as well as to bring attention to a lot of these issues. And the last thing I wanted to say is that when you're inviting in on a bicycle ride, you're really investing your time and effort into doing something different. Next slide, please. So Familias Unidas Ganando Accesibilidad focuses on families. And when we talk about family, we're not just talking about blood family, we're talking about all types of families. So just to give an example, we have a Nana Brigade, which are Nanas on trikes. And those are folks that have really pushed their families as well as their community to look at ridership different, right? So, you know, bringing our Nanas along has been really impactful. We also have young riders. We always encourage family to bring the young riders, and that includes babies. We have a lot of familias who are coming out with their babies, and I will show that on the next slide. But other folks that we interact with, of course, is our spaces increasingly being safer for folks of color. We've been hearing that a lot, both from our Black and Indigenous communities. We are developing more relationships to make these spaces more accessible and safe. Because while we might be talking about the South Side, and particularly it's known as Latinx area, we have all these communities that are really disenfranchised that we feel like it's important to work with. Other things we want to highlight is that Fuga's leadership is really women driven, and those who identify with WTF. So we hold spaces for that. In 2019, we were able to do our first Pride Ride and make that space for folks, in which we got a lot of great reception, a lot of great feedback from folks, as well as a lot of folks coming out. Next slide, please. All right, so I know I'm gonna rush through this because I wanna make sure that my fellow folks have time. So this was our last Friday ride on February 26th, and you can see there that there's babies on the ride. Yes, we had 3 babies, so under 10 years old riding with us. So just wanted to show that there. Next slide, please. So in order to do this work, we're constantly taking data, and that's one thing that Fuga will be using going forward, is really using data to be able to not only get some type of funding, but also let the folks know the work that we're doing. So last ride, we had 55 plus riders. Of that, we had under 10 years old, we had 5, and over 50 years old, we had 3 riders confirmed. We have a wonderful partnership with To-Go Bike Share program here in Tucson, where they allow us accessibility to their bikes free of charge. Anytime we ask, and we're super thankful, because that's where it starts, right? Is working with these organizations, working and partnering up to making these bicycles accessible for folks to be on these rides. So out of the 10 bikes that were reserved, 4 had never used a To-Go Bike Share or a bike share system, period. So, and of course, because we all got home safe, it was 100% safe. So going forward, just want to talk about what Fuga has in store. We will be doing a lot of great things in 2021, mainly catching up of what we missed of 2020. And so we're really excited to maybe expand in some areas, like I said, reclaim some streets and some spaces, because being absent on the South Side really just showed it this weekend that we have a lot of more work to do to reclaim those spaces. Next slide, please. So we use social media as a way to get folks engaged. These are our platforms. We have a lot of Fugistas, Fugistecs, who like to support in giving us feedback as well as pictures. So I definitely invite all of you to join one of those platforms and just see what we're all about. And next slide. And with that, it's really it. Gracias, everyone. Thank you so much. That's our contact info right there. You can always find us at El Pueblo Center, last Friday of the month at 6 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That was great. And you guys are always doing fantastic work. We are doing pretty well on time. We're not, we aren't getting behind, so that's good. Our next speaker will be Greg Reniger, who is a principal transportation planner in San Antonio in the Public Works Department. He leads that city's Vision Zero, and so we are pretty excited to have him tell us about that. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. You're still muted, Greg. So you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. We're good now. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone from San Antonio. Thank y'all for having me here at the Tucson Transportation Summit. We really appreciate it. And we're excited to share what we have going on here in San Antonio. So as we heard, my name is Greg Reininger. I've been with the city for about 6.5 years and leading the Vision Zero initiative for a few of those. So our mission statement here in San Antonio is that together we can achieve zero fatalities on our roadways because every person in our community matters. So this is what we try to tell people every time we go out, that person riding their bike or driving their car or walking on the street is someone's mom, someone's dad, brother, sister, son, daughter, friend, coworker, and we're all just trying to get where we need to go. We just want to get there safely. So here in San Antonio, our team tracks, obviously we track crashes and fatalities and what's going on in the city. And on average, we average about 50,000 traffic crashes every single year. That's just what's reported. So either $1,000 or more in damages or an injury occurs. So it's almost 140 a day. This past year was a little bit lower because of the fewer driving and fewer trips due to the pandemic, but generally it's about 50,000 a year. And we know that there's going to be crashes in the city, but it's really our goal to figure out how to stop this number. So this 157 is the average number of people killed on all modes in transportation in San Antonio for the past 5 years. So that's what this looks like visually, and we know that it's a lot. It's unbelievable to think of 157 people losing their lives, and it's not just a number. Like I said, it's someone's friends or family, coworkers, and we know that really impacts people. It's not just 157 people impacted. It's all their friends and their families too. For example, a couple of years ago, we had a city employee that was leaving work downtown and was hit by a bus, and that message goes out to all 12,000 city employees of what happened, and it really hits home. So just to imagine how big this number can really be. So this is kind of what we see at a lot of Vision Zero cities, REs. And I know we heard about this a little bit earlier. Here in San Antonio, we focus on education, encouragement, engineering, enforcement, evaluation, and equity. Equity is our newest E that we added last year. That's something that I'll comment on as well. So I'll go through these and kind of just elaborate what we're doing here in San Antonio. Education in the schools is huge. This is where kids are really learning everything in the world. And we want to teach them from a young age about traffic safety and things that they can do, and things that if they think something's dangerous on their walk to school or their ride to school, how can they tell us? How can they tell their parents? Things like that. Obviously, it's been a little bit difficult in the last year or so to get into schools to actually give these presentations, to do bike rodeos. So we tried to adapt to this, and what we've done is created traffic safety videos. So these are available in English and Spanish. It teaches mostly about walking and biking, whether it's the school or just in the community. It also talks about railroad safety crossings, which is something that's a concern here in San Antonio. So we were able to put this up on our website, and we shared it. We also have it on different CDs and different flash drives that we're able to give out to other people that don't have access to internet or somewhere they can stream it. But that's something that we were really happy that we were able to get out and actually probably reach more people with the digital one than in person. We hope to go back in person eventually whenever school districts allow that, but this is kind of what we're working with for now. Other in-person outreach, this was something that was important to us too, was talking to the business community in San Antonio, specifically those who had fleet vehicles. We knew that a lot of these construction or plumbing, roofing, communication companies drive bigger vehicles than your average family car. And we know that the bigger the vehicle, the more likely it is that person that's hit by it, whether it's a pedestrian or a bicycle or even another vehicle, could result in a more serious injury or even death. So going out there and just trying to explain them what our organization's about and what we're doing and what they can do to take part of and help lower our numbers. Encouragement, sort of a continuation of education. So some things that we've done are just to kind of remind people of what's going on, but also to remember those that we've lost. This picture on the right is from about a year and a half ago in November 2019. for World Day of Remembrance, where we worked with our community and a local art group to come with a mural that was dedicated to traffic fatality victims. And it was actually placed on a fire station over on the west side of San Antonio, which was kind of a high injury area of the city. So we were able to participate with the community to come up with the idea of what is going to be on the mural. And also they had the chance to come out and actually paint the mural with the artists themselves. This past year for this event, we wanted to kind of connect with some other families that have been the victims of traffic violence. So the two families we connected with were actually part of drinking and driving incidents where their loved ones were killed. And something that we want to do is just, and the families too, is get this message out before it impacts them. A lot of times it takes something serious that impacts us to change our habits. And it's really our goal is to get that ahead of time, because with traffic violence, there might not be a second chance. So since we started Vision Zero, about 5.5 years ago, we've had about 400 events, talked to about 65,000 people. And continuing with that, with engineering, we know this is a big one on our roadways here in San Antonio. We have a lot of 5-lane, a lot of 7-lane roadways. Working with our transit agency, developing a high injury corridor networks to help build mid-block crossings, especially in areas that are a great distance from traffic signals. We know people are going to cross, and we know we need to provide some safe refuge. Also working with our public works department, we pass a bond about every 5 years or so, and working with them to help design safer streets that are bigger projects than just mid-block crossings. These are 1-2 mile projects that we can give our input in to really help make a difference. And it's not just our team here that Vision Zero that does all of this. It's our team that does school zone markings, pavement markings, building sidewalks, accessibility, our audible pedestrian crossings, and even our development services office that all kind of work together. We all have that same goal. And these are some of our partner agencies that we have here in Vision Zero in San Antonio that work with us as well, that we all have the same goal, is to get to zero. Looking at enforcement, this is one that we're probably, I'd say, monitoring to figure out how we can make some edits to. So in the past, we have worked with SAPD to do some high visibility enforcement in areas of the city where we were seeing high crash trends, and also work at enhancing the training. So what we did was we created a roll call video where we wanted to educate officers on the importance of crash reports and how the more accurate their data is, the better solutions we can create to mitigate for some of these crashes, and release that on social media. And we also released a RAC card. It's our police chief here on the bottom right. It was basically like a fold-out card that had information like this about speed, distracted driving, that can be handed out to the public. A lot of these things through our safe officers that go around to different maybe community meetings or schools can give out information like this as well. But it's something that we continue to look at. And then evaluation. So we did see an increase this past year. I know that all the major Texas cities also saw an increase this past year. A lot of it we think was because with fewer congestion, we saw a rise in speed and crashes. For vehicles, we saw a rise, and we think a lot of them were also single vehicle crashes related to speed. We did see a rise in pedestrian crashes too. We did see a decrease in bicycle and motorcycle. And this is something that we're about averaging the same as we were last year right now as well. Most of our crashes or fatalities here in San Antonio are vehicle, but we do have a huge percentage of pedestrian crashes or fatalities at 33%. So we developed different reports that help us with this, help identify areas of the city that need work through pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles that we're working on to help figure out where these improvements need to be made. And finally, equity is one that we incorporated last year. The city of San Antonio developed an Office of Equity about 2 years ago. So we try to take a new equity approach when it comes to looking at projects. For example, trying to find areas of the city where we know people are walking, we know where there's crashes, we know where there's less car ownership, where can we provide better solutions. Creating a Braille version of the RAC card that I showed y'all earlier. And also looking at it for outreach. We know that most of our outreach locations were asked to go somewhere, but we know not everyone even knows we exist. So we need to make the effort to go out and find areas of the community that are a little more vulnerable, that need help, and just need to talk to us about what we can do better. So us taking initiative to go out and do that. We have everything on our website, visionzerosa.com, if anyone has questions or wants resources. And that's all I have for y'all today. I really appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you so much, Greg. We appreciate sharing San Antonio's experience. We're now going to hear from Tracy McMillan, who is a senior associate at Nelson Nygaard. She is apparently my twin because she brings health and transportation expertise, looking at active transportation, travel behavior, and health impacts of the built environment. She has background leading a lot of great projects, including evaluation and analysis at UC Berkeley's Safe Transportation and Education Center. And we are super excited to have her here to talk to us about Safe Streets for All. So I'm going to turn my mic over to you, and you, the shorter you can do so that we can have questions, the better. Please give us your wisdom.
Okay, this is going to be a speed run. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. I was with the UC Berkeley Safe Trek. I am now with the transportation consulting firm Nelson Nygaard, and I am the person standing between you and the rest of the day and the Q&A period, so I'll get right to it. When Gabriella and I talked about this session, we had a broad-ranging discussion about safe streets for all. There's so much to talk about, as you've heard from my session co-presenters. So I wanted to spend a few minutes today discussing some of the fundamentals that guide the work that I do, in the career that I've had, as Nicole said, from weaving in public health and transportation throughout my career, and who I am and the lenses I wear as that professional, but also who I am as an advocate, mom, and road user. So as I said, I have a multidisciplinary background, which is really valuable because the world in which we live is a very complex environment that requires varied solutions to make safe streets for all. One of the fundamental tools that I view transportation safety through is this safe systems approach. It's the foundation upon which many Vision Zero programs are built, and it provides a structure that acknowledges the fundamental principles of a safe transportation system and the core elements that influence the multi-pronged approach that transportation safety should take to make streets safe for all road users through policy programming and investment. And Greg talked about a bit of that, of what they're doing in San Antonio. But that doesn't end or begin at the agency's transportation planning or public works department. I'm going to focus on two of the principles and a core element that are fundamental to how I approach transportation safety. The responsibility is shared, humans are vulnerable to injury, and data. So responsibility is shared doesn't just mean that users of the transportation system should be safe and be seen. It means that we all travel through a transportation system that has been designed and developed using various instruments of travel that can and do affect the level of safety that each road user feels or experiences. So weaving in the humans are vulnerable to injury principle, we know that vehicle speed is a fundamental factor in the risk of injury and death to a pedestrian in a traffic crash. And how we're designing the roadways, how are we designing our roadways to manage the speed, to reduce the risk of severe injury or death should a crash occur? Right now, many roadways within our cities are currently designed for a higher speed than is posted. If our goal is to make the streets safe for all by reducing severe injury or death, how would we change the way that we design streets or manage speed? As Greg mentioned, the other component in this graphic that's critical to the severity of injury is vehicle design. Policymakers outside of the US, such as in Europe, have been much more proactive than we have in the US in thinking about the role vehicle design plays in traffic safety for those outside the vehicle. Our rating system focuses on safety within the vehicle, but we need to put more focus on what is the risk of how is the vehicle design and the mass of the vehicle going to impact a pedestrian or a cyclist if they're struck. There's been a lot of innovation in vehicle design, both in passenger and commercial vehicles, that could be implemented here in the US. what are some of the components within our transportation system that we use each day that we can look at through the lens of all of our road users and through a minor adjustment, make a positive impact on real and perceived safety? So as an example, pedestrian intervals and signal phases are generally set for able-bodied individuals. Yet at any given crossing, there are only some individuals that are temporarily abled. Most of us need more time to make the light because of age, disability, impaired speed due to carrying or transporting things. This is a graphic that I saw on Twitter one day back in 2017, and I just had to have it. So I contacted the person who created it, Kristen Agnello with Plus Urban. She is based in Canada, so everything is in the metric system, not in our feet per second. But it is a fantastic visual, I think, in terms of thinking about how is our system created and what is a modification we could make to make this fundamental aspect of all of our streets and intersections a little bit more conscious for all road users. This consciousness towards the role we all play in creating a system that considers the needs and vulnerability of all is captured in many guides that are available, created by organizations such as NACTO. This is a guide on safe routes for older adults that we did create at UC Berkeley SafeTrek. And it, we have other tools that guide engineering, planning and engineering in our cities that we hope will change over time to reflect the needs of all road users. This safe systems approach and the principles of shared responsibility and understanding of vulnerability were put into practice in a ped bike safety project we recently did for Stanislaus Council of Governments in California. They really did approach the project, and we assisted them with it, with this multi-pronged aspect of trying to talk to and engage different audiences throughout the county to talk about road safety. For example, the advertising campaign was really targeted towards road users, though hopefully consciously or subconsciously policymakers as well. And the campaign messaging was focused on building understanding, empathy, and dignity among road users. Coincidentally, since the campaign went out during the time of the pandemic, the message of "we're all on this road together" really had a dual meaning. The project also included a safety summit for professionals and decision makers that shared the fundamentals of the safe systems approach and how various aspects of it, the safe systems approach, was being implemented within that region and then in California across the state. In the interest of time, I'll skip this video, but this is a video that also played on public television. Classic cars are part of the culture in Stanislaus County, so that was kind of the imagery, some of the imagery that was carried through in that video. Oh. So just to near the end of the presentation, I'll say that data-driven decision-making has become a mantra in much of our planning processes. Data is important and it's really valuable, and I'm a researcher and I love evaluation, so I love data. But we really do, I think it's very important for us to think about how we're using the data to drive and guide decisions. And we need to be constantly examining who and what is represented in the data we're using and who and what is missing. Data was a key piece in the project that I mentioned in Stanislaus County. It informed the development of the campaign, as well as the virtual engagement activities that we rolled out that were focused on road safety that we had to shift to because we couldn't do in-person events. We used focus group and survey data, stakeholder engagement data that was all geographically and demographically targeted to make sure that participation, the data was reflected the diversity of the community, and that the voices of everyone within the community were at the table. One of the tools that we utilized and trained individuals to use in community engagement is this tool from UC Berkeley SafeTrack called Street Story, which is a crowdsourced tool available in English and Spanish, both on the web and a paper version, that allows people to indicate where they've had near misses, where they don't feel safe walking or biking, and where they may have had a crash that they didn't report to the police. So in terms of data, I really challenge us to examine how we define data and what data is valued in our decision-making process. My former collaborator, Tony Dang, who was the executive director of California Walks and is now the Caltrans Sustainability Program Manager, really said it best, I think. We can't only count what we can count. We need to be conscious of that each day in the work that we do. Finally, throughout all the work on Safe Streets for All, equity can and should be a guiding principle and hopefully infused throughout the process. It should be reflected in who is at the table, the data that's utilized, how time is valued both in an engagement process, but also in considering the needs of all users. However, as I was putting together this presentation and running through it again over the past day, I realized that as much as I like the safe systems approach, equity is absent in the graphic. I think equity was intended to be implicit or assumed throughout, but that's not good enough. Equity needs to be explicit for there to be action. I'll leave you with this question. Where do you think we should explicitly infuse equity within this safe systems process? So thank you again to Gabriella and her team for putting on this first Tucson Transportation Talks, and I'm honored to be a part of it. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We really appreciate your bringing back that data piece, because we want to have data-driven discussions and interventions, but they also need to be about things that are important to our communities. So while I'm getting the Q&A set up, I did want to ask Tracy first to stop sharing her screen, and then I will share mine to show you what the situation is here right now in Tucson. And then we'll do a few quick Q&As. We're going to extend our session until 1:08 so that we can get a few questions in and then be still able to go to the next things on time. So with that, I am going to display one of the first questions that I think is so important. And that is a question that states, this is a fantastic talk. Thank you. Can you talk a little more about what decongest means to you and others at PMJ? So this is to Marianne. My understanding is that many highways and dangerous roads through Black and brown neighborhoods were built with the goal of decongesting traffic. So how do we deal with that reality that decongestion has multiple meanings?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, decongest definitely has multiple meanings. I think I really wanted to highlight a way that PMJ has been able to, I guess, not challenge, but deal with having our communities be less decongested. And that is, and very similar to what Vanessa was saying, was through bikes and through the access of different means of transportation, multimodal transportation. So one of our longest standing programs at People for Mobility Justice has been our free bicycle education classes, with also coupling that with Know Your Rights. So when PMJ first started, we would host free bicycle education classes at day laborer centers because we, spoke to day laborers, and we were finding out that many of these day laborers were being stopped by police because they, just quite frankly didn't know the rules of the road. They were riding opposite sides of the traffic. They were, maybe they didn't have lights. And so they were, being stopped. So our first program was actually receiving a grant through Metro to give free bicycle education classes with handing out free bike lights and helmets to folks. We still, 10 years later, we're still doing, like I said, free bicycle education classes. We're having a program right now at Koreatown Rampart Village at a formerly affordable housing center with formerly houseless residents, and giving them free bicycle education classes and actually starting a free bike share program with the residents. And we're actually looking into getting electro bikes for the residents on there too. And, coupling that with education, and then really trying to, see how the residents there would want to use bicycles for their means of transportation. So yeah, decongest, I feel like has a lot of different meanings, but I feel like that's one way that, we see as a way to decongest our streets. So.
Thank you so much. I mean, great examples of exactly how you can start dealing with some of those challenges and those tensions that are there. Okay, so I have a question I think super important because these are leaders in how to do this right. There is a question, does Fuga or People for Mobility Justice accept financial donations? The answer is yes. So I'm going to display the People for Mobility Justice one right now. And then Fuga says that they are in the process of getting their system set up. So that is awesome. So one of the other things that we're getting questions about are things that are specific to Tucson. And so rather than get into really specifics, like why is this intersection, so terrible, because we all know it prioritizes cars and a lot of them and not other users. I do think that this other one is, that's a little more general, is probably more appropriate. And it is the question that most cars that fatally strike pedestrians will do so on higher traffic, higher speed roads. What factors encourage or hinder the ability to channel pedestrian traffic onto slower roads without heavy vehicle traffic? And I would add is that the route to go, is to get pedestrians off? Or should we be doing something else? Does anyone want to chime in? How do you guys use that in San Antonio? How do you think about that, Greg?
That's a good question. So I know a big or important topic around San Antonio and everywhere is complete streets. And although some streets may prioritize maybe one mode over another, depending on if it's a say like an industrial corridor, things like that, obviously it's going to prioritize like semi trucks or something like that. But I think part of our team's goal is to really emphasize the need for those other modes, especially when it comes to our bond. When I showed y'all that every 5 years we have $500 million in street projects that we try to work on. And that's one of our biggest things, and is just showing data and the importance of it, and to see these improvements and just trying to get their voice heard, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. Okay, so my next question kind of also goes with this notion that we have to build for all users and kind of all conditions. And here in Tucson, one of the biggest is heat. So there's a question that is to the city of Tucson I'd like to give to Fuga, which is, what do we do to install shade structures alongside roads and trails so that we can use these all year long? And is that on your radar? And this will be our last question. So Vanessa, can you tell us how you guys are thinking about that?
Most definitely, especially on the south side of Tucson. It is known for its heat island, and the south side and the west side are actually the locations in Tucson that have the least amount of trees. Thank goodness for our mayor, Regina Romero, that it has the 1 million trees and they're on it. So we have a lot of these barrios already installing these trees. And while these trees are young and need to blossom and grow, that is something that's definitely on our radar, especially with a lot of the South Tucson and the West Side utilizing public transit. And in these spaces, a lot of times there's not even some kind of canopy. So most definitely that's on our radar. And luckily with our connections with not only transportation, but also working with mayor and council, and getting the information from the public directly from neighbors and our rides, we're able to bring that voice from the community to the table, where a lot of times our folks are not at the table. And a lot of times the South Side historically has been neglected and has not been given the space. So we're constantly advocating. I think that's one of the most important things, considering that last summer was our hottest summer yet. And if we're not making real changes, we have to become adaptable and resilient. So
thank you so much, Vanessa. Trees take time to grow. All of this takes time. So we have to start investing now and investing in the places and the people that we actually value and proclaim to want to protect. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, I guess, to Gabriella to tell us what is next.
Thank you, Nicole, for moderating, and panelists for a great discussion. We're going to be kicked off now at 1:10, but please join us again tomorrow for day 2 session. And if you're not able to make it, a reminder that all of the sessions the recordings will be available to attendees after the fact. So thank you. What a great way to end the day. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you to all our speakers. It was wonderful and lovely to spend this time with you. Go out and do great work as you are.